All right, Kevin back with you for another episode of the $1 Million Relationships Podcast. And today I'm here with Mike Brcic. Mike, welcome. So awesome to have you on the show today.
Well, likewise. So yeah, I'm thrilled to be here. A couple of dads just hanging out after Father's Day and
Yes.
shooting the breeze.
With our kids home from school for the summer, and
Yeah,
life gets busier in the summer, doesn't it? So,
it does.
and you know what, Mike, I wouldn't trade that for nothing. I mean, I love being a husband and a father, and of course now a grand man. We got 9 grandkids now and stuff, and whenever I say that to somebody, people are like, Kev, you don't look old enough to have 9 grandkids. And I'm like, I'll accept that. And
Yeah, yeah. Well,
so,
congratulations on that.
yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I want to start off by giving a shot because you and I met almost like 9, 10 years ago and I don't remember, what did Giovanni call the event when he was hosting? It was called Archangel, wasn't it? Yeah, it was Archangel,
I think
right?
so. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And you were just sharing me with me before we hit the record button that was like the first like entrepreneur event that you had like ever attended? Is that ever or one of the first?
Well, it was the first sort of large scale conference like that, like
Okay.
conference slash community kind of thing. I've
Yeah.
been to like smaller local events here in Toronto and stuff like that, but that was the
Okay.
first, kind of mastermind community I'd ever been a part of.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, you picked a good one, didn't you? Because that was a great, I mean, that was a great group of people, and I met some really amazing entrepreneurs. Well, heck, you and I mean, good, example. Like all these years later, we're still friends, and
Yeah.
all because we met at that event. And of course, since then we've run into each other at differing events as well because we found out that like we kind of like going to stuff like that and hanging out and meeting like-minded entrepreneurs, and
Yeah.
what a testament right there to the power of right relationships and of being and putting ourselves intentionally in the right places to be able to meet those kind of people and create those kind of relationships and stuff. And so, well, what I would like to do is I just want to, just have a heart-to-heart conversation with you, and I'm really looking forward to this. And I'm just going to start off with a simple question to start with: is what do you do, Mike, and who do you serve? We'll start there.
Hmm. Well, I often tell people in response to that question, I say I take high achieving entrepreneurs and I take them to some of the wildest places on earth and I make them cry.
Yeah, yeah. So,
That's just my offhand way of saying I host, as you know, I host these adventures in these really beautiful, wild, spectacular places around the world. And they're a mix of adventure and travel experience, but also this facilitated journey. And so, both I and my co-facilitators, we're taking the group through a journey, an emotional journey, a psychological journey, a spiritual one that mirrors the other journey that we're taking people on. And so I sort of look at it as if I'm going to take this group of entrepreneurs and make them fly halfway around the world, I'm going to give them a really meaningful experience. And I'm going to give them an opportunity. These are really busy people. They're successful, busy people, and they're kind of go, go, go all the time. And I'm going to make them slow down and we're going to ask some big questions and we're going to reflect on some big questions. And I'm going to help them just get a little bit clear on who they are inside and how much does their life reflect who they are on the inside? And maybe see if we can close that gap a little bit for them. And then we also have a ton of fun in the process. We take them to some amazing places, introduce them to some amazing people, but also we're having this journey. And sometimes that journey, when we're asking the right questions, brings up tears, it brings up, all sorts of stuff. But ultimately, I'm helping, creating a meaningful journey for people so that when they come back, they're a little bit clearer on how they want to show up in this world and who they want to show up with.
wow. How did you even get into doing that kind of work and hosting like adventures like that, Mike?
Yeah, I guess I sort of stumbled into it by accident. And
Okay.
my first business, I day after my last exam, my last university exam, I packed up my Volvo station wagon, drove out west, go west, young man, and I drove until I stopped in this little ski town in the Canadian Rockies, and I thought, okay, this is where I'll hang out, and I didn't want to deal with quote unquote real life just yet. I just wanted to be a ski bum for a year and then I'd figure it out. And
Okay.
I promptly got fired from my first three jobs, realized I'm a terrible employee, realized that I'm probably unemployable in this tiny little town. And I decided to start a business. And I ended up starting a business, taking people mountain biking on the local trails there. One thing led to another, scaled all over British Columbia, all over Canada, all over the world.
Wow.
By the time I sold the company in 2019, we were operating in 45 different countries, won all sorts of awards in the process. But a couple years prior to that, 2017, um, in a nutshell, I had tea with a friend of mine. I think maybe you know him, UJ Ramdas, is his
Oh,
name.
I
Maybe you
knew
met
of
him.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, he started the 5 Minute Journal with his friend Alex,
Yes.
and which millions of people have used
Yeah.
at this point. And we had tea one day, and he said to me, I really want to do one of your trips. They look so amazing, but I've never mountain biked before. And I said, well, we don't really have anything for beginners, but if you can put together a group, then we can put together something custom for you. Next day, I had lunch with a couple other guys, and this is going back to relationships, right?
Yeah.
These were people I met through different communities, and I had lunch with these two guys, Brad Peterson and Matt Bertulli, who went on to found this amazing company called Pila that
Okay.
is ridding the world of plastic. It's a nine-figure company now. And they had just gotten back from Dan Martell's Maple Summit that he hosts every year. In the winter they go cat skiing. A bunch of entrepreneurs, they go cat skiing and they have fun and they talk shop afterwards. And they said, "Oh, you need to do something like that in the summer on mountain bikes." And I said, "Oh, that's a good idea." I just had tea with UJ and they knew UJ. One thing led to another. Started my first event. It was 6 days. It was in the Canadian Rockies. We rode bikes, we went on hikes, stuff like that. And then we'd come back, mid-afternoon, late afternoon, and we'd sit around and we'd talk shop and we'd talk about business and life and stuff like that. They loved it. They asked me to do more. I did some more of them and eventually sold my other company so I could focus on that. And over the years, it's kind of morphed. It started off as a bit of an entrepreneur conference with a lot of adventure thrown in, and
Okay.
now it's become sort of this personal development, experiences I described to you. Because what I realized, the people who were coming to these things, they didn't need more business advice. They had coaches. They belonged to, organizations like EO, whatever, but they didn't have a lot of places they could turn to for the bigger questions and, to just really be able to open up and say, hey, I'm really struggling in my marriage, or I'm having a hard time keeping it all together for my team or whatever. So those are the types of conversations we could have. Once I started leaning into that, I realized people really need that. They really need places where they can just talk about the real stuff. They don't have to pretend. They don't have to, be anybody other than who they are. So that's kind of how it's morphed over the years, and I really love doing it, and
Yeah.
I love the people I get to serve.
Yeah, yeah. So what does inspire you most? You made the comment that you take people on adventures to all these really amazing places and then you make them cry. So there's obviously a real emotional side of this, probably for you too. What does inspire you most about the work that you get to do and the impact that you're making, Mike?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, this is all very fresh because about it's 3 weeks ago we wrapped up. I did an event in Iceland with my friend Philip McKernan. Maybe you know him.
I know of Phil. Yes, I
Yeah,
actually saw him talking at MMT event.
yeah, really, really gifted facilitator. So we
Yeah.
collaborated on this event, and I approached him last year in February of 2025 at MMT in the hallway, and I said to him, Philip, like, I've got this inkling that you and I need to collaborate. I really love your work, and I feel like your strengths and my strengths would really dovetail together beautifully because he is an amazing coach. He's, without a word of false, humility, he's a better coach than I am. But I also know that I'm better at event design. And he is like, I'm really good at designing a context for transformative experiences from the places I pick and the places I go and all that kind of stuff. So I
Okay.
thought, oh, these two things would combine really well. Anyway, that wrapped up about 3 weeks ago, and my instincts were right. Like we worked, it took us a couple of days to figure it out, how we work together,
Mhm.
but we figured it out, and it was really a powerful experience, and there were some real transformations there. And then just listening to the stories. And we had a check-in call about a week and a half ago, just to see where everybody's at, and just seeing the transformations and people having this profound shifts since coming back. And then I'm connected to a lot of these people through just some of them are friends or whatever, and just being able to witness their journeys and how things have shifted for them since then has been really powerful. And so it just, to know that I played a little role in somebody moving a little
Yeah.
closer to their own truth, of being able to live a life that feels a little bit more aligned, like that's a pretty rewarding feeling.
You
And
bet.
also just the fact, some of these people employ dozens of other people, and they've got families and they've got kids, and just to know the ripple effect of that really keeps me motivated.
You bet. You bet. Wow. So what is an example of a result that you've helped someone get that and you don't have to name names. Oh, you can if you want, totally your call. But what's a result you've helped someone get that you're just incredibly proud of, Mike?
Hmm. Well, again, I think I'll flip it back to that same event just because it's
Okay.
so fresh.
Sure.
Um, well, I'll give you two examples, one from
Okay.
Iceland and one from Ecuador in 2023. Um, One of the things I do, and Philip and I did in Iceland, is helping people basically in a nutshell, if I can be a little bit crude, just stop bullshitting to themselves, right? And we all do this. We go through life and we say, oh, my marriage is fine, or my work is fine, or, my health is fine, or whatever. And and yet buried underneath these things are just all these complicated feelings, right? About these things. There's a misalignment there somewhere where there's certain needs that aren't getting met, whatever. And as humans, we don't like to face up to that. So we just kind of bury it down. And the convenient thing about being an entrepreneur is there's always more work to do, right? Yeah, I'm sure you recognize this. There's never a point where you say, there's absolutely nothing I could do. All
Yeah,
the work
that
is done. I'm just going to kick back, right? You can always figure out there's always more work you can do, right? And
yep.
so many entrepreneurs, myself included, we get very good at trying to avoid these difficult feelings. And one of the most socially acceptable ways we can do that is just work. We're like really working, and working is a great way to avoid feeling the more difficult feelings. And so what we do is we create a context where people can actually slow down and they can reflect and they can be honest with themselves. And sometimes that means, we got to go after them. Philip's really good at just like going after people and recognizing when they are actually bullshitting. And so there was one guy there, and you know, he started off by saying life is great. We've built a beautiful life. Life is fantastic. And again, I don't want to betray anything. I'm not going to name any names or anything like that. But on the surface, everything looked great. But then, as the days went by, and we started to dig, and people got a little bit more honest and whatever, he admitted that he really didn't feel a sense of connection in his marriage. He really didn't feel connected to his partner. His emotional needs were not getting met. His needs for intimacy and connection, both emotional intimacy and physical intimacy, and that he was actually really starved. And and so basically, step one is like getting him to admit that, but both to the room, which felt really vulnerable for him, but also to himself. Really admit to himself, like, hey, this is a need that I've ignored for a long time. And then step two is helping him actually get the courage for having that conversation, and training him on, helping him practice on what that conversation might look like, so that that conversation is more likely to go well, right? And so to give you an example from a conversation like that, which can so easily go off the rails, often we approach a conversation like that and we say, you're not meeting my needs and you're not doing this and you're not doing that. And of course, how's the other person going to respond, right? They're probably going to get
Get
kind of
defensive.
defensive about that. So we helped them frame it in terms of getting clear on what his actual needs are. What are, and men aren't, we're not very good at A, tapping into our needs and recognizing what they are and naming them, and B, actually expressing them to somebody else. So we helped him get clear on what is the actual need, and when he says, I want more connection, what does that actually look like? And then how to express that. And so there's one way to express that says, you're not doing this and you're not giving me this and you're not giving me that, which creates the defensiveness. And there's another that says, hey, I really value you as a partner. I really deeply want to connect with you. And I feel like, I feel like I'm not getting enough of that. And could we explore that together? And this is just like something that's really important to me. And I hope we can have a good conversation about this. And that's far more likely to go positively. And, and to make a long story short, he, he's had some beautiful conversations with his partner since coming back from Iceland. And he was sending me some, a couple of days after he got home, he was sending me these kind of spicy emoji texts, you know, which wow, which was quite funny, but he was getting his needs met. And that's,
Yeah.
it's really beautiful to see that. And all he needed to do was get, honest with himself that he'd sort of ignored this part of his life and he just needed to have an open, honest conversation with his
Yeah.
partner. And both Philip and I, we're both big on this idea that like everything you want in life, the most meaningful things you want in life are on the other side of a difficult conversation that you've been avoiding. Right. And so how can we help people get better at having those difficult conversations? And most of the time, and it's courage and it's practice and it's a little bit of, training to have those difficult conversations. But people will find if they do this enough times that these conversations really aren't as hard as I made them out to be. Right. We build these things up in our head and then we
You
avoid them
bet.
because we think it's going to go terribly. It's like, oh, and if you express it the right way, then it tends to go better more often than not. So the other one I want to take you back to is Ecuador in March of 2023, and I took a group of 20 entrepreneurs to Ecuador. The pinnacle of this experience was an attempt to summit Mount Cotopaxi, which is Ecuador's second highest volcano, just under 20,000 feet. So this was by far one of the most difficult events I've ever run. And people get this image that like all of my events are like crazy and they're going to be skydiving into a volcano or something like that. Whatever. Usually we're just like going on some nice hikes and there are some challenging bits, but it's more accessible than people think it is. This one was a bit of an exception. This one was intentionally really hard, and I told people you need to train for at least 4 months if you want a chance at standing on that summit because it's almost 20,000 feet. Long story short, there was a woman there who, she trained really hard into it, but she went into it with the mindset like, I'm going to try, but I really don't think I'm going to make it. And so I really, my co-facilitator and I really tried to anchor in her mind, like, you're going to give it everything you got. You're going to try, and that's detach yourself from the outcome, success or no success. Just put everything you got into this thing, and then just see what happens.
Yeah.
So summit day, basically you drive halfway up the mountain. You stay at the refugio during the day. It was lights out at 6 p.m. and then try and get a little bit of sleep and then wake up at 10, gear up, and 11 o'clock at night we start climbing with the goal of making it to the summit no later than 8 a.m. 8 a.m. was the turnaround time. And you got to get off the mountain before noon because it starts to warm up and the crevasse, it gets unstable, that kind of thing. So I almost kill myself getting to the summit. I make it to the summit, I think around 7 o'clock or something like that. Hang out for a bit, then start making our way down. Everybody's already gone up. This one woman and her partner, and you're roped in with your partner and one guide. So the three of them are going up, and it's like 7:15 at this point. They still got a long way to go to the summit. I'm like, I wave at them and I say, well, good luck. They end up making it to the summit, just like minutes to spare. Made it to the summit, and I see her later, and she was just spent. We were all spent, but she was extra spent. She gave it everything she got, and she made it to that summit, and that was the start of a profound transformation for her, because she realized, and she's spoken, quite often and quite publicly about this. She realized that she was capable of doing really very difficult things physically, but then that filtered into the rest of her life. And what happened in the ensuing months after that event, she realized she was no longer aligned with the work that she was doing, the company she was running.
Yeah.
So over the course of the next year, she wound down that company, and she's now doing work that's much more aligned with her soul, for lack of a better word. And she left a marriage that was no longer working, and she'd known it wasn't working for a long time, but she just hadn't felt the courage or the energy or whatever to face this thing.
Yeah.
And she came back and she admitted to herself, this marriage is not working. It's not working for me. It's not working for my partner. And it's time to end this. And so that's, a little over 2 years ago. And she's made some drastic changes in her life. And they were difficult, hard decisions and hard transitions. But she's in a much, much better place now. And she's living with far deeper alignment with who she is at her core. So those are
Wow.
two long-winded examples
That
that I
well, that
wanted to
one
share with you.
that was two phenomenal examples right there. Wow. Well, Okay, so now that we've got some context set here and listeners have an idea about, what you're all about and what you do and all that, I want to switch gears just a little bit. I want to start talking about the relationship side of all this. So, have you ever been introduced to a person or persons that completely changed the course of your life or your business, so much so that much of what you have today would not be possible if not for this person or persons? And I'm just really excited to hear your story and your experience around this topic of relationships, Mike.
Yeah. Well, there's three people that I want to name,
Okay.
and I'll start by naming the person that introduced me to the other two people, who then introduced me to more people that really changed
Okay.
my life. The first was a guy named Floyd Marinescu. He's quite a successful entrepreneur. He's become a dear friend. He and another fellow, Ron Sang, created this organization, Toronto Entrepreneurs of Passion and Purpose. And it was really at the heart of it. It was just a Facebook group, and it grew quite quickly. And they would do these, sort of little pop-up events here and there. They did an event one night, and they invited me to be one of the speakers. There were four speakers that night
Okay.
at this event. And there was, I don't know, maybe 100 people showed up to this event. And it was a lot of fun. I met some great people. What the two people that I met that night, and they were two of the other speakers that radically changed my life, were Gio. We talked about Giovanni
Mhm.
Marsico, and that Archangel event, which I attended shortly after. And then the other is Jason Gaynard from MMT.
Ah, ah,
And before I pivot to them, I'll say just for that small event, it was under 100 people. And it's kind of amazing to this day. That was, 10 years ago or something like that. To this day, I still have people, probably once a month or something like that. Oh, I saw you speak at that event. And I really loved your talk. And it's like, wow, that's crazy. Like how many people were in this room? Because like, I know it was like under 100, but it seems like it was 1,000, just how many people. And so it's just like being in the right room with the right people and
yeah.
you're in alignment and stuff like that. It's just so powerful.
Yeah.
So then I got in, Gio and I chatted a bit before and after the event, and I really loved his talk. I attended his event. Like I said, that was the first big entrepreneur
Uh-huh.
event that I attended. I met people like you and Jesse Elder and all these other people that just sort of, expanded my mind in terms of what was possible in this crazy, world of entrepreneurship. And people that were just pursuing things with such heart and passion and doing like amazing thing. And it made me realize from talking to these people, like, wow, these people are really good at what they do, but as far as I can tell, they don't have, they're not sprinkled with halo dust or, anything like that. They're just normal people. And it sort of demystified the idea of success for me. And
Okay.
it's just like these, if there's one thing that they had that I didn't, was just like real commitment and focus, on their craft and where they wanted to. One of the big things I took away from that event was the power of focus. Not trying to be everything to everybody. The people I saw that were the most successful, they had just honed in on one thing and they became world class and they became
Yeah.
known for that thing, right?
Yes. Yes.
Um, and so that just it opened me up to that idea. It opened me up to some amazing people, and it opened me up to the belief and the identity that I belonged in those rooms. Because prior to actually attending, I just thought like, oh, I don't belong at MMT or I don't belong here or whatever. Like those people are way more successful. They're way more deserving or whatever. And actually, as I spent time there, I was like, no, these are just regular people, and I belong here. I have just as much to offer as they do.
Yeah.
And then Jason, and spending time with him and learning a little bit more about MMT. Shortly after that, I ended up applying and got accepted, and that was the beginning of this beautiful journey. I met some incredible people there, some of whom are my closest friends to this day. That was the beginning. I was in that sort of in between phase where I was pivoting towards Wayfinders and away from my previous company. And even down to the broker that I was introduced to, who helped me sell my previous company, that was through a connection at MMT. And that same guy who introduced me to the broker became my best customer. He's now done, I don't know, 10, 11 events with me.
Wow. Wow.
Um, and many of the people at MMT have come to my events as well. And and I think it dovetails nicely with MMT is like this amazing community, and then I like to think I create these amazing personal transformation events, and it dovetails nicely. But Jason's really transformed my life just in terms of the people he's surrounded me with. Not just amazing entrepreneurs, but amazing humans. Some very mature, incredibly gifted and grounded individuals that I'm so blessed to call my friends. So
Yes.
there's
Yeah.
uh, there's and it started with Floyd, just creating the context for that room, for me to be in that room, to the people that I met in that room. And there's just so much power in being in the right rooms or creating the right rooms or whatever that may be. Just figure out
Yeah.
where your rooms are and go hang out in them.
That's right. Yeah. Wow. I think like you, I think of some of the people that I met in those rooms at the Archangel events or that at the Mastermind Talks events. I mean, I were you at the MMT that was that he hosted in Napa years ago and stuff? Were you at that Napa event by chance?
No, I wasn't.
No.
I think
Okay.
I
Okay.
was I went to the Ojai event in 2018, I think I want to say,
Okay.
or something like that, or
Okay.
2017. That was my first one. Yeah,
Okay.
September 2017, I think it was, or I don't know.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but I
Because I
think
know
that
I
was
just
the
I
one right before then was
okay.
in Napa. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it was a beautiful event. I remember I met, I was just thinking how I met John Ruland at that event and stuff. And he had just come out with his book, Giftology, and how close John and I became over the years. And he passed away. Well, August will be 2 years since he passed away completely unexpectedly. And, but it's like, you meet these people that you just come into your life and just you form these amazing friendships, and yeah, you get to do business together. And like you said, you got one guy that you met at these events that he's been to like 10 or 11 of your events now, and you've got to know each other really well over the years. And just all the stuff that you're sharing is just such a testament, to the power of right relationships, because right relationships just make business easy. It's fun. It's enjoyable. It just happens in flow, and
yeah,
and it's like, and man, I mean, just yeah, and it's so cool to see. And like, even you and Phil just kind of you're just like, what, I think we could do something really cool together. And like, I'm really good at this thing, and you're really good at this thing. And imagine if we brought our gifts together, what could we do together that we wouldn't be able to do each of us on our own, kind of a thing. And
yeah,
it's just cool having that experience and just finding out what can we do. and uh
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's just having fun, making an impact with people that we just like hanging around. And
Exactly. Yeah, and
yeah.
my very first MMT, the first time I ever met Philip, he was doing a workshop. It was just like I don't know, 60, 90-minute workshop.
Okay.
And I was in the midst of, I'd had my foot on the gas with my previous company for years, bringing on investors, taking on debt, growing the team, expanding all over the world, all that kind of thing. And as I was doing that, I was getting more and more miserable. And I didn't know why. I was like, I'm doing all the things like I'm supposed to be doing here. And two things happened during that time. One was I read Ryan Holiday's book, Ego is the Enemy.
Okay.
And I'm sure you know Ryan Holiday,
Yep.
very, very gifted writer. And I'm reading this book, and I'm like, damn it, Brian, have you been following me? Like, why are you writing about my life without my permission? And then the second was this session that I attended with Philip, and there was a question he asked, and it was something along the lines of where are you seeking validation and from whom? And as I started reflecting on this question and writing about it, I realized I was that my whole thing with my company and why I had my foot on the gas and why I was trying to build this thing was I wanted validation from the world, and it was validation that I never got from my mom or my dad. And bless their souls, they're wonderful parents. They didn't do anything wrong, but it was just there's something that my heart wanted, my soul wanted that they didn't quite give me, and so then I spent the rest of my life trying to get that from the world. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it, and I just realized, I woke up next day and like, what am I doing? Why am I like I'm this is not a healthy reason for for running a business or scaling a business. Like I'm never going to get that from the business. Maybe I should seek it from myself and say save all these people some time and energy and myself. And so and that was, I say the beginning of the end for that company. The company endures to this day. I sold it to a wonderful buyer who was much more aligned with it. But that was the beginning of the end of my time with that company. And I'm so glad that it took me on this other path. And so it's so beautiful and so amazing how that came full circle from that, 10 years ago to where I'm standing on a ridge in Iceland, on top of this ridge in Iceland, overlooking one of the most majestic views I've ever seen. And we've got 23 people with us that we're taking on this incredible journey. And I'm collaborating with this amazing man that I, looked up to, and then spending time with him and realizing, hey, I'm his peer. This he's a hero of mine, but he's also my peer, and we deeply respect each other, and he respects my work. And what a beautiful full circle that is, just from just from being in the right room at the right place, and then just from identifying an opportunity and stopping him in the hallway and saying, Philip, let's do something together. None of that would have happened if I wasn't in that room to begin with.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to underscore to you and your listeners, whatever, those events are quite expensive. You don't have to spend that kind of money. It helps if you can, but find the rooms that you can afford to be in, and and if you can, spend a little bit to get in rooms where people are just a little bit ahead of you, and you can soak up from them and learn from them, and then eventually, you'll be the person who's mentoring others who are coming up behind you, whatever. And it's such a beautiful thing to just, be in those places and surround yourself with the right people.
Amen. Amen. So now I'm curious, you built the previous company, and you've discovered, and you invested a lot of time and effort into that, and like you said, looking for validation, versus now this company that you're building, that now you realize once you've made that discovery, it's like, oh, I don't need to build a company to get that validation and stuff. And so what's it been like building this company with the new discovery that you made?
Hmm. Very different experience. When I decided, after running a couple of events and deciding, hey, I want to put my energy into this. I'm gonna sell the other company, and I want to put my time into this, and I'm gonna make this an actual company. And when I started, I said, okay, I don't want to repeat the mistakes I made the previous company, where it was just like scale, scale, scale. And the thing that often happens with when you're trying to scale rapidly is, revenues go up like this, and then expenses go up like this, like even steeper, right? And it's very easy to grow yourself out of business. So I said, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to reverse engineer the business model. And I'm going to start with, how much money do I need to live a comfortable living, to be able to, live the not super lavish lifestyle, but I want to be comfortable. How much money do I need for that? And how do I reverse? And I've got some constraints, 2 to 3 events a year, and I want to put my heart and soul into these things. And so, what does the business model look like for that? And what do I need to charge? And how many people do I need? Stuff like that. So I started with the end goal in mind and said, okay, I'm going to focus on that. I don't need to scale beyond that. That's what I want to do. I don't want to have any staff because I find, having staff stressful, and they're always looking to me for something. And I'm always putting out fires and whatnot. So it's like, how do I do this as a company of one? And how do I anchor around providing really deep value for everybody? Because the amount that I want to charge people, I'd better be providing some high value if I'm going to charge them that amount. Right. And so it was a very different approach, and it's worked beautifully for, 8.5 years. And what's interesting is now, my kids are older. One kid is off to college in the fall. The other two are, the twins are a couple years behind her. There's more space in my calendars. They're far more self-sufficient. Now I'm in this interesting phase where I'm envisioning, what does that look like if I'm impacting more people and growing it. So I I I keep checking myself and asking myself, why are you doing this? And making sure that I'm doing this for the right reasons, that I'm not seeking validation, that, all these things. And I feel very anchored around the idea that I want to scale this because I want to impact more people. And I know the ripple of that, the effects of that, of being able to impact more people, creates a ripple of impact throughout the whole world, throughout the universe, whatever you want to say. And so I keep anchoring to that. Just impact more people, create more transformations for people. You're gonna help build a more beautiful world in the process. So I have to keep, bringing myself back to that because it's very easy to say, no, I've got the ego under control. But the ego's he's a sneaky little devil. He
He
comes in
is, isn't he?
through the back door or whatever, and then you create all these justifications. No, I'm doing it for this and I'm doing it for that, and so I'm really trying to bring it back to the transformation, the people I'm serving, the value I'm creating for them. I find it helpful to think about the kids of the people I'm serving because most of my clients are customers, are parents, I mean. And if I think about if I can help somebody live a life with more meaning, more connection, more alignment, whatever, how is that going to show up, in how they show up at home for their kids? It's probably going to be a beautiful thing. If I think about their kids and their grandkids and their kids, it's it's really motivating to me. Just how many people you can impact just by impacting one person and helping
That's
them
right.
live life with a little bit more alignment, a little more grace, a little more ease. It's a beautiful thing. And I've got to, I've never had to market before. I have a super high repeat rate, lots of referrals. So now I'm trying to grow this thing. I'm like, how do you market? How do you market in this day? I haven't done this marketing thing in 10 years, right? It's very different than it was 10 years ago. But I keep coming back to the idea of it comes down to relationships.
Yeah.
And if you want to scale a business 400% a year or whatever, then probably hard to do that through relationships.
Yeah.
But if you want to just, scale patiently, you can do that through relationships.
Totally.
And what's
Totally.
what's interesting, what's interesting coming back to relationships again, because that's the theme of your podcast. I've discovered that actually you probably can, if you want to, you probably can scale rapidly through relationships. And I can give you an example. Um, there was this guy who came with me to Patagonia last December, and he's a EO member, so Entrepreneurs Organization. I know you're familiar with them, but some of your listeners might not be. They're
Sure.
a global organization with hundreds of chapters, and they serve entrepreneurs all over the world. So this guy who came to Patagonia, he was in a forum, like a mastermind with a bunch of other guys, and he was raving about his Patagonia experience. Well, this guy, one of the guys in his forum, reaches out to me and says, "Hey, I just heard all about Patagonia from Dima. Could we hop on a call?" And so I'm thinking, okay, well, he just wants to, maybe he wants to go on a trip himself. We hop on a call, and it turns out he's the incoming chair of the under 35, wing of EO,
Okay.
and EO 35 is all over the world, thousands of members. And he says, I've been looking at I want to run some events for EO 35 members. And Dima just raved about his experience with you. And it seems like you might be a good fit for helping us do this. One thing leads to another. We wrap up this call and he's like, could you do three events for me between now and May of 2027? And I said to him like, well, maybe like, let's think about that carefully. I want to make sure like I deliver amazing, quality and stuff like that. So I don't want to push too, but that alone could double the size of my business. Just that one conversation, that one relationship, right? I only run three events a year. Now he wants me to run three more. And so just, again, comes down to relationships and just showing up ready to serve and ready to give and connecting with people. And sometimes that's all you got to do.
That's right. What a beautiful example of that right there. That you're even having to just like, well, hold on here. Let's make sure that if I was going to do this, I mean, I want to deliver a certain way that I'm accustomed to doing this, and that, like you said, yeah, this has a possibility to double your business just like that because of one relationship, over the next, year and a half or so, and is that something that I want? Even, do I want to double my business that quickly? And maybe I do, maybe I don't, and
Yeah.
but man, what another testament right there to the power of right relationships,
Mhm.
and well, I'll tell you, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I knew it was going to be when you and I talked about this at Gio's last event, and we're like, you know what, we should do an interview for the podcast, and I knew it was going to be good because I didn't know all the details that you shared here today, but I knew some of the cursory stuff, and I'm like this was way better than I was even planning on it being. So thank you.
Yay.
so
Thank you.
so
Thank
well, for
you.
anybody that, right now might be kind of, listening to this, thinking to themselves like, man, Kev, Mike, I mean, what he's doing sounds amazing. And I might be interested in being a part of that if it was a right fit for me and stuff. Any websites, any resources we can share with folks, Mike?
Yeah, the website is way-finders.com or
Okay.
way-finders.com. And we actually just announced and launched our 2027 events there. So I got an amazing one in Northern Colombia, this beautiful area called the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, really spectacular, spectacular area. June going back to, not going back to, June going to Morocco with Philip McKernan. Again,
Okay.
we're doing a follow-up event. And then December, I'm going back to Patagonia because it was just so good last time around. We have to do it again.
Wow. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, is there any last thing that you feel led to share, Mike, before we call it a wrap?
Yeah, one of the things we didn't touch on, I want to touch on it briefly, is just the the value of being in a room or a relationship or a place where you can just be yourself.
Yeah.
And when you can just show up in a relationship and just be comfortable and be yourself, that creates a context for really beautiful relationships, right? And I'm sure, you and I both have been in rooms where we don't quite feel that. There's sort of like, a bit of a posturing or pretending kind of vibe going on, and everybody's, you know, but then you're in a different room where it just feels like you can just show up and just be yourself, and you can say, "Hey, no, I don't have my shit together right now, but tell me about you, whatever." And it's kind of a two-way street, right? It's like the right room, the right people, the right context, but it's also what you bring to that and being willing to step into that vulnerability a little bit. And what I found is is I can sometimes shift, even if the room doesn't quite have that vibe, I can often shift a conversation just by being willing to step a
Yeah.
little in that direction. And it doesn't mean, oh, hi, Kevin, nice to meet you. Let me tell you about the worst thing that's happening in my life right now. But it's just being willing to take the conversation in a slightly deeper direction.
Yeah.
And there's, two elements I found are really helpful. It's just that courage, that willingness to be vulnerable, just a little bit beyond what it might normally be, and then curiosity, just bringing like really intense curiosity about the other person. And when you show the other person that you actually are genuinely curious about them and want to get to know them, they
Yeah.
will often open up a little bit more. And then boom, you've gone from a transactional type of thing where you're exchanging business cards and then you're like, I don't actually want to talk to this person again, to like, oh wow, I really feel like I know this person. I want to get to know them better. I'm gonna follow up with them when I get home. And see if we can have a coffee. I want to get to know them better.
That's right.
That's transformational when you can have those kinds of relationships.
Amen. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Mike, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you. And man, I'm excited to get this out there because you shared so much and like what we just left it with right there about just really having transformational kinds of conversations versus just the transactional ones, that you get home and you're like, yeah, I don't even remember who I met because nothing stuck, nothing stood out for me, or them. And those transformational conversations, those ones stick out. And when they hear from you again, they're going to be like, oh, Mike, so great to hear from you, man. And big
Exactly.
difference, big difference. So, well, once again, thanks so much, Mike. Really appreciate it. And I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you as well, Kevin. Every conversation we have is just lights me up.
Yeah, same.